Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition, and I greet you live today from Morrisville, North Carolina, in the eighth largest state in the United States. And today I wanted to, first of all, just open up real quickly that yesterday afternoon or evening, I attended a rally, met him briefly, the former President of the United States, Bill Clinton, who addressed a packed rally in Raleigh coming out of the Harris Walls bus for a great 10-minute address to the people of North Carolina about the importance of these elections and a very tight race. The president's message was quite interesting. The first thing he talked about is the lack of a shared information network. The fact that so much misinformation is coming from both sides of the aisle, particularly Republicans, it's making it really hard for Democrats to connect the areas of North Carolina and the country they need to, rural areas. He reminded many of us that when he was governor, he spent many times going to diners where they're in Republican towns in Arkansas and learned how to talk to people on the other side and solve problems together. His famous quote was, "If you scratch them hard enough, sooner or later you'll find a person under there somewhere," and everybody laughed. But it was a really compelling argument, and he did talk about the office of the presidency, the fact that he knows Vice President Harris and Tim Walz very well, and does believe that they have the judgment and the temperament to run this country, along with leading us as leaders of the nation in the free world of America, the commander-in-chief of our armed forces and the leader of the free world. It's going to be a close race in North Carolina. He thinks that they need to turn out higher than normal Democrats and independents in urban areas, but be very competitive in the eastern part of North Carolina, Greenville area. So the president was here for about 3.5 days, and we're going to be, and it was a really, really great remarks. With that being said, it's getting to the wire now, 2 more weeks. The numbers look pretty dead even right now. I think it'll come down to North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan. And all of these are within the margin of error, about 0.7 or 1%, with Republicans turning out as many as Democrats did the last few days of early voting. So anyway, I think it's going to be a close race. This could affect some of the other races. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that, at least in North Carolina. And the final thing I'll end with is, you look at Donald Trump and sometimes he's outperformed polls. So some skeptics say that the close polling actually favors him in a re-election campaign, because in the last 2 times he's run, he did much better than the polls numbers that we're seeing now. Or could it just be a last dash of young voters, black voters, Asian voters, would allow Vice President Harris to pull off an upset? I still think it would be an upset, but to pull it off by winning 2 or 3 of these states. So a lot to talk about today. I probably missed out some world events. Mark, I'm going to bring you in, and I got to leave in about 5 minutes.
No problem. Like I said, we've got Sasha Stein. We also got one of the founders of the network, Kimberly Calhoun, with us. So I'm going to bring them on as well and everything.
Hey,
the one thing I was going to add to what you said.
this isn't your first time meeting Clinton, is it?
No, I met him a couple of times. I didn't even get a picture. I was just, I met him with my wife, and we just wanted to hear him talk. But it was a really, really good talk, and I really got a lot out of it. He looks great. I mean, he looks better than he did 2 years ago. He's put on a little weight, and he looked really good, I thought, and he spoke really well. And it's a good sign. But I mean, he said we got to work hard, and the other joke was, it was a kind of a facetious joke. He got really hot, so he took off his sweatshirt, and then he said, "Well, I promise you, this is as far as I'm going to go." And then, he said, "Yeah." He said, "When you get to 50, you look better with your clothes on."
He's always had a good sense of humor. Before we move on into the show, I do want to bring up that David Walker, who has a show after this, is hosting a debate on Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. West Coast time. This is just maybe to get the wheels going for people who could be alternative to the lesser of the two evils, as we call them. Our citizens of this country said nobody wanted the same campaign again of the two same people, and we ended up with it. But here is David's show. Please, join us, ask questions. It will be live Wednesday night. We will be broadcasting.
And also, by the way, I am working with Kimberly and David for he and I to host 1 or 2 shows before the election. So we're going to be setting that up. And I'm going to run. I'm going to try to get back for the last few minutes of
before you run,
Economics Monday. I'll be back in about an hour.
Steve, before you run, I did have one quick question. I know you got to run. But one of the things that I heard Leonardo talking about, me and the mayor of Durham, was that this past weekend, as we started early voting in North Carolina, there was a sizable portion of folks that came from North Carolina Central University. So he was very proud of that and thought that the youth vote was going to be a important deciding factor here in North Carolina. So I just wanted your takes on that, because as I watched the video that he posted, it was a number of students marching to the polls and everything. So it does look like the youth vote could be important.
It could be. So, I mean, we'll see the final tide here, whether Obama's going to come to North Carolina, probably the last day of the election. I know I'm meeting Neera Tanden on the 3rd. I'm interviewing her for something else, but she's coming. She was a senior policy advisor to the Clinton campaign, working with the Biden administration, was denied the Office of Management Budget because of controversial remarks she made about Republicans. But yeah, I think the youth vote could turn out. But I'll be back in about an hour. I've got to go take my son back to state. He came to see, and then I'll be back. And sorry, guys, after the election, I'll be back more frequently, and I'll be working with Kimberly to get David and I on before the election for 1 or 2.
No problem.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
One of the
important factors of doing a debate like this, of people who really aren't probably in the running for the campaign, is maybe start getting the wheels spinning for the next campaign, and to let people know that you do have an alternative in this country. You just have to go vote for that alternative. And so many people are so scared to cash in their vote for the alternative. And I just believe that if we all just united and did it, we might end up with a better choice for our country. But, Steve, I'm looking forward to doing the shows with you.
I'm going to firm it up this week, and then send me the Economics Monday. I'm going to try to make the last 15 minutes of it. So if you could send that to me, that'd be great.
Well, we'll see how that goes and everything along those lines. And a part of that will be discussing the campaign and everything. The other thing that I was going to mention to Steve, but Steve is gone, but I'll bring in Rick Rosner and Shaquille as well, was that one of Clinton's favorite famous incidences was actually talked about, and they were joking about it at an event that I was at yesterday, because the Durham Symphony was performing. They were performing American classics and all along those lines, so like the Music of Gold and Florentine Price and other folks as well, and everything like that. And one of the things that the conductor, the maestro, said was that on one of the numbers, I think it was one of Gold's numbers, they were performing the same number that Bill Clinton was known for having performed, I believe, on the Arsenio Hall show and all along those lines. So they were trying to get it to him since he was here in the area, so he could hopefully see how well they did with that and how well it succeeded or did not succeed. So like I said, he was trying to do that, and he did make that joke that he was hoping somebody would text Bill Clinton while he was in Raleigh and all along those lines. I did have a question for you, Shaquille. Shaquille, one of the things that Kim kind of alluded to, and maybe you got some thoughts around it, is that a lot of people don't want to vote, and you're in Australia, Sasha's in Canada, for a third party candidate because they feel that that is a wasted vote and all along those lines. So even though we are airing that particular debate, I know a lot of people are, as Kim kind of alluded to, afraid to vote for the third-party candidate, whether it's Cornel West, whether it's Jill Stein, whether it's whoever, because at the end of the day, it's probably going to be either a Republican or a Democrat that wins. So you may be tossing your vote away, but then there's this notion of coalition building and setting up for the future, which is kind of what Kim alluded to. So what is your take on that as one that studies world politics, as to whether you can ever have this notion of a third-party candidate actually rising to prominence and even winning?
Well, I mean, theoretically, you could, I suppose, if 50% of the country voted for Jill Stein, then I suppose she could be the president. But the difficulty I think for America is that your system isn't really designed for it. And I think if you were to try and incorporate that, you'd have to either have preferential voting, or we've got preferential voting, which is what you guys would refer to as an instant runoff. I think something like that could work, so you could actually put your first preference in, and then ultimately you would have to prefer one of the two parties. So you would actually list them in order of preferences. That's how we do it in Australia, and I think that's how they do it in Canada. Sasha, you might be able to let me know about that. I know the NDP, I think, is winning in British Columbia at the moment. The UK system is wildly different yet again. So I just don't think it would work in the US based on the current way of doing things that you guys have.
Yeah.
We don't have a preferential system of voting in Canada. You have one box. You have several options, 5, 6, could be infinite, but you have to select one box.
Oh, okay. I stand corrected. I'm sorry. I was under the impression that you had same as us.
Well,
The last time we had two different.
Speaking of something new, just really quickly, since we got the Australian representative here, or one of the only one that comes in from Australia as of now, even though we've had past ones and everything. But Shaquille, what is your take on this whole notion of not wanting to be part of the monarchy? Because apparently your Australian Senator Lydia Thorpe shouted out at Charles that she was not our king, and he was also heckled by various lawmakers, I guess, accusing him of complicity in the indigenous genocide. So what is your take on this whole notion of whether y'all need to be part of the royal family or not part of the royal family?
Well, I personally am a Republican and have been since I was a little kid and first found out what a monarchy was. And my view on that hasn't changed. Lydia Thorpe's an absolute fucking dropkick, and she should be booted out of the parliament. And she's extremely divisive, extremely unpopular, and she's a black supremacist. And her behaviour towards everybody has just been disgraceful. As I said, I'm a Republican. I don't just think that Australia should be a republic. I think that when I say Republican, I'm not talking about Democrats and Republicans in the United States. That's a different situation. That's the name of the two parties. Republicanism as in a style of government. It's my personal view that Canada should become a republic. It's my personal view that the UK should become a republic. I'm not Canadian, so I won't weigh in on that too much, but they should. But certainly the UK should. Where I stay in South Kensington, it's not a particularly popular position. They like the monarchy, each to their own. I think that there should be some level of respect shown for them. I think that Lydia Thorpe's actions were totally unacceptable. But the very interesting thing is that none of the state premiers, which would be the equivalent of your governors over there, actually showed up to meet them either. And I think on the international stage, that has drawn some criticism. When we had the 2000 Olympics, the Queen was asked not to open the ceremony. So I think Australians are a bit tired of the idea that a foreign person can veto our parliament as a birthright. That doesn't. Have we got some feedback coming through? That doesn't work for us. That's not, I think, where most people are, and I think we would like to see the Governor General be, a directly elected person and not the Queen's representative. But look, I obviously feel much more strongly about the issue than others, and I think that people if people prefer to have a monarchy, fair enough. But there are little things as well that I think are disgraceful. The Queen, or now the King's head, will be on every single coin. Prior to that, the Queen's head is on every single coin. I think that that's quite insulting. We've been around for a couple of 100 years, and I think that there are people, Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, who deserve to have some recognition. So, and in the UK, it's even more sycophantic, where she's, the Queen's on every note and every coin, and then the song is "God Save the Queen." Well, give me a break, please, God. My opinion on that.
So I want to go back to the third party thing. To have a successful third party candidate, you have to have a candidate people want to vote for. People don't want to vote for Jill Stein because she's a joke. She's never won any elected office. She only shows up once every 4 years. The U.S. is set up to have two parties. The last time we had two different parties was in the 1850s. Abraham Lincoln was the first Republican president in 1860. So it's really hard to shift which two parties dominate. The last time we had a really popular third-party candidate was Ross Perot in 1992. And even he was not entirely serious because he was kind of a lunatic. He had popular stances, but he was in the race. Then he dropped out. Then he came back in. And even after doing that, he got 19% of the vote. So you need somebody like that who's...
So what we'd be talking about if we're talking about having a viable third party alternative, it's not just somebody like Cornel West or Jill Stein. What we're talking about is actually having a particular party. So if I can apply Australian standards to the US, which it doesn't quite relate, but just for the sake of the example, you guys have got the Libertarian Party over there. So if that was to get nationwide prominence, they might be, for example, they might be in a coalition with the Republicans. You might also see parties like, Christian Families and things like that would be in a coalition with the Republicans. And perhaps on the left, you'd see things like the Green Party and those sorts of groups that would be more aligned with the Democrats. What that would mean is that if a political party was to get less than 50%, they would actually require the support of one of the minor parties in order to be able to form government. And so that means that there needs to be more of a negotiation on certain policies, because otherwise you won't be able to form government. Now, again, your system's different because the president's directly elected, whereas with us, it's whoever's got the majority in the House of Representatives.
We're not set up for that.
We're not set up for that.
But if you wanted to have something like that, then I would say that the country would need to get together and say, okay, how do we include more voices? But I will say that I think that, things like crossing the floor, the Labor Party MPs in Australia can't cross the floor, whereas Democrats vote against, the party all the time, as do Republicans. So, again, your system is different, but things like ending the filibuster, that's why I always say to Americans, you've got to be very careful what you're doing, because the filibuster was there specifically to make sure that minority voices were heard in Congress. So your system would work, I think, reasonably well, but there's been way too much gamemanship, political gamemanship on both sides, especially in the last sort of decade or so. And that, I think, needs to end, because I think that is actually undermining your democracy.
Shaquille, along those same lines, one of the arguments, and I've made it and other people have made it on this network as well, is that there is this notion of being an anti-establishment candidate, which is what, technically speaking, a lot of third-party candidates have been in the past. But there have been arguments made, and I think that they are legitimate arguments, that is part of the reason of Trump's popularity, part of the reason of Obama's popularity, was that they were not, quote-unquote, establishment politicians. I mean, and that's one of the things that they're trying to label Kamala as that she is an establishment politician. I've heard Trump do that, and I've heard others do it as well. So, maybe that's part of the problem, is that over the last several years, it sounds like the basis of what a third-party candidate should be has been eroded, because both parties are trying to go the anti-establishment route.
Well, I think this is the issue that you have with someone like Bernie Sanders. See, Bernie Sanders is an anti-establishment person on the left.
Right.
Donald Trump's an anti-establishment person. I wouldn't really put him on the right, but let's say that he's on the right. And so that's why I think the Republicans are in such disarray, because the old school Republicans found themselves with nowhere really to go. But then that puts Kamala Harris actually in a difficult position, because she can't exactly reject the Cheney's support. But, you're now taking somebody that you've been accusing for decades of being a warmonger, who was responsible for, or at least partially responsible for, Iraq and Afghanistan, and spending trillions of dollars in that war. And now you're embracing them into the Democrats. So I think Kamala Harris has just got it coming from all directions. And Donald Trump gets to sort of sail through and say, well, I'm the one that's trying to clear this out. I'm the one that wants to drain the swamp, that sort of stuff. So,
Rick, you had a thought, and Sasha as well?
I just wanted to say, for a third-party candidate, I'd vote for like Mark Cuban, who's like an actual smart billionaire businessman, but I think he's got better things to do than run for office.
So would you vote for Elon Musk then?
No, because he's like,
right,
I know. Hold on. I don't think he's as good a business. I mean, all right, Elon Musk is good at getting government contracts, and to the tune of becoming the world's richest man. I think I think he's kind of a goof and a lunatic. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, but see, Rick, I think you know where I was leading to with that question. For you to sit there and say, well, I'd vote for someone like Mark Cuban because he's smart and a successful businessman. He's also currently supporting Kamala Harris.
Yeah,
right. And it's not, and I don't think it's any coincidence that if I was to name any billionaire that happens to be supporting Donald Trump, you would find a reason why you don't want to support them.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you'd have to name some, and I'd have to know them. I don't know how many billionaires I know. But I might even support like Mitt Romney.
Well, you obviously. Well, how do you feel about Kevin O'Leary then?
I'd have to. I mean, that's Mr. Wonderful, and
Mr. Wonderful. Yeah.
And he's
Canadian, so he can't run your politics. But let's just pretend that he
neither
could.
Can Elon Musk. Elon Musk is South African, but Kevin O'Leary, I'd have to.
No, but Elon Musk could run. He just couldn't run as president, right?
Right. So, but O'Leary, like he plays the asshole on Shark Tank. The biggest he likes.
So would you? So I assume that you wouldn't be happy to vote for him either, right?
I'd have to see what his actual policy stances are because he plays a character on TV.
Well, but hang on. But our Dallas Mavericks guy, he's not released policies either, has he?
No, but I mean, I know that he's more aligned with my politics because he's supporting Harris. But okay, so that's what I'm saying. So the criteria of I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I'll leave it alone with this. But the criteria of he's smart and he's a good business person doesn't really apply. The reason you'd want to vote for him is because he's supporting the same candidate as you are. He's a business person and kind of have share my politics.
But the overriding issue is that he shares your politics. And what I find very interesting is that everybody, including him, is saying, "Oh no, she's not going to tax unrealized capital gains." Well, why is she talking about it then? Like, I think everybody knows the reason why nobody's defending the position is because it is absolutely absurd and it would destroy Silicon Valley. It would destroy the startup companies. It would destroy the economy. And so what everyone's doing is they're trying to pretend like, well, let's vote for her for the great vibes and let's actually ignore just how bad her policies are.
So,
I've looked at the policies and I find them very helpful for the startup community. I've looked at Trump's policies and the ones that we have had to live under, the Tax Cut Job Act, and it did not help the small business industry at all. It was intended truly to help the corporations, but it put a horrible, and Nick would agree with this, it put a horrible tax deficit on this country, and it will continue to do so. Just like, experts have said that if we go and continue on this path, we're going to end in trillions and trillions of dollars more of debt. And you know what? That's fine. You know what? If that's what the people want, then they need to vote that way. If the Tax Cut Job Act didn't benefit you, you need to review it and understand what you're voting for, because that's what you're going to continue to get for the next 4 years or maybe even 8 years, because they can extend it up to 10 years if they want to. So is due to expire in 2025. It will expire if Trump isn't in office. It will probably get severely overhauled and amended if he is. Did it help the international trade? Yes, it did. It was there to help the international trade, but did it put us in more deficit? Yes, it did. Those are the math and the stats from more universities than not. Those are the math and stats from people. And one of the things that it was supposed to do is the corporations were supposed to buy equipment, and they had corporations come and testify or, say what they actually did with the money, and they didn't buy equipment so they could provide more jobs for the middle class. They invested in more IP. They did not create more jobs for middle class, nor did they create better paying jobs for middle class. But many of the executives did get an increase in salary. So just take a look. I mean, if you're making $400,000 or more a year and you will get the 40% tax cut, vote for him. And if you don't, seriously consider why you are sitting in the position that you're sitting in. Because I've had so many people complain to me in my circles that it's, they're struggling, they're suffering, they don't make enough money, they haven't had a pay increase in years. Some have lost jobs and have struggled finding jobs. Okay, go take a look at the Tax Cut Job Act and understand that this is what we've had to live by. And if you're paying more taxes, then it's probably because you're earning less than $72,000 a year, which they increase the taxes on people under $100,000 a year to cover the tax deficit of $5 trillion. So these are stats. You can't fact check them, but you're not going to prove me wrong because too many people have agreed to it. But I sat there and watched wealthy corporations testify. Yeah, we didn't buy equipment like we were supposed to. We invested in IP, and that's fine. You use the money for something. But go ahead. Sasha's had his hand up for a minute, so let's let Sasha talk.
Okay, yesterday I saw evening program Farid Zakaria by the name America First, and he's going in a great depth of analyzing where that came from, the concept America First, and so on. And he actually quite convincingly proves that really who brought it up, although he was not the first one to announce it was Pat Buchanan, and that was, and his words are definitely something what Trump repeats today, word by word. There's no difference what Pat Buchanan was talking about in the 90s and what Trump talking about today. The problem with concept America First that it fails miserably every time when it's implemented. It was before Second World War. It was nowadays with Pat Buchanan rhetorics. The problem is that America at this stage of development where it is now, it must assure that it controls world economic routes, that it controls the power or distribution of power in all the world. And you cannot do that from the stance of America First. As soon as you announce America First, you're out of international circulation. You have to go back to your doghouse and just stay there until the owner will let you out. Oh, does America want to implement policy? Because that was Trump preaching that America first, everybody go back. We don't need Asia, we don't need Europe, we don't need Ukraine, Russia, anybody else. Fuck all of them, and let's come back. America first, we are here. But you know what? It's not gonna last even the Trump's presidency, because there is a very powerful opposition to United States growing all over the world, including some funds like, for example, what's that name? The 5 countries they started this funny BRICS. Yeah, BRICS. Actually, there's much more now than 5. It's growing to 20 and probably more. But okay, I'm not taking that seriously myself. However, it's there, and it's all based on anti-Americanism. That's the only purpose of existing of BRICS, is to hurt United States whenever and wherever possible. That's their only aim. That's the only purpose to exist. And Trump is playing exactly in the hands of this BRICS house, if you wish. So this is a very interesting program. Now, what I noticed, and I'm looking at Trump's appearances here and there, let's admit something. Trump is tired. He cannot carry the same performances as he did 8 years ago. 4 years ago, I'm not saying that for sure because of the COVID times or so on, there were less appearances or so on, so okay, let's leave it alone. But 8 years. So he was 70 and now he's 78. He aged 8 years. He's just old, and it shows. He cannot carry the rallies. He cannot rally his speeches. He cannot do anything. And people notice that people are not stupid. So those who don't care and they're not watching his rallies, that's okay. Now, people who do care and watch it, they understand what's going on. The old man needs to
But Sasha and Shaquille.
Let me respond on that. Actually, I'm going to support Sasha. Where remember when Trump took an early dementia test and he got a perfect score on it? That was January 2018, nearly 7 years ago. So would he take the same test today? His people are canceling interviews for him all over the place. His last big, he still has rallies, but his last big stunt was yesterday when he fried French fries at a McDonald's. He didn't have to say anything. So yeah,
but Rick, isn't that actually playing toward his base? I don't know whether Shaquille would.
Yeah, it is.
Because one of the arguments against Kamala Harris has been, did she work for McDonald's? And if she worked for McDonald's, did she have a successful record there? Because I guess there's been, I haven't heard anybody that's actually found the records of when she worked at McDonald's, even though it's supposed to have happened when she was in school and everything. But the argument seems to be
cares about how she did at McDonald's? I freaking worked in a donut shop in 1977. Who freaking cares?
Yeah. Shaquille, any take on that? Because I think that's what he was trying to do, was appeal toward those people that are the working class and those fellow working class people and everything. So any take on that?
Well, because McDonald's doesn't have any records of her working there, he's just basically going in and being a troll, which is what he does. He's a troll like that, yeah? To Sasha's comments, he's had a pretty grueling schedule. I think he's done more interviews, more rallies, more appearances. He's gone to more states. He's even campaigned in places that people tell him he's got no shot at. Like he was in California, which you might make the argument that New York, if you slice and dice the numbers the right way, that he's got a shot in New York. I don't think anybody can tell you with any sincerity that California's any possibility of California flipping. But he's there, he's going around. He's in Colorado. He's in all these different places where he doesn't really have a shot. So I think the idea he's just old and tired, it's not an argument that I think is particularly compelling. And, I think that most people that are on his side are going to view it as I've always drawn the comparison to Joe Biden. If he was actually if he was actually a Democrat and media loved him, all this would be covered up and it would all be, oh, look how energetic he is. He's so amazing. Look at how great his schedule is, et cetera, et cetera. Because he's a Republican, the media focuses only on those things that tend to make him look bad. Look, the polls are showing that he's in the lead. The betting markets are showing that he's in the lead. The early voting shows that he's actually had an increase in his support in the mail-in votes. And I take it from some of the comments being made by panelists that people on this show are now beginning to accept that it's more likely going to be a Donald Trump presidency than a Harris presidency, which I think is one of those things that you just reluctantly come to the conclusion that, he's going to win. And I will stand by what I've been saying for months and months and months. If they stopped ignoring what the American people were saying and what the whole world was saying to them, they wouldn't be in this position right now because they would have done things differently, and now it's probably too late for them to.
But
hold on, wait. Let me respond to that. In 2022, we had a flood of right-wing polls by right-wing pollsters say that there was going to be a red wave. The same thing is happening now. I took a look at individual pollsters, the most recent polls on The Hill, which is an aggregator, and at 538.com. And all at 538, the 9 most recent polls are by rabid right-wing pollsters. The top 6 at The Hill are, and we can't tell who's in the lead because they're flooding the zone with right-wing polls. This morning, the Wall Street Journal wrote about the flood of right-wing polls. You can't tell. Also, today on MSNBC, they talked about a flood of weird bets coming in on Polymarket, 30 million from Crypto Bros. So all this is, as you get close to an election, I'm sure the Democrats are doing their best to do their propaganda, but there's a flood of right-wing propaganda, including all these polls showing a tightening race, but they're from, I can talk about specific pollsters, Tip Insights, that uses Limbaugh's slogan as their own, and their homepage is full of editorials against Harris. And 4 out of 6 of the most recent polls on the Hill are from those guys. You got Atlas Intel, whose polling numbers are so weird. They have Trump up by 6 with women and down by 5 with men, which makes no sense whatsoever.
Well, that's what I was going to ask is how much does it hurt the because Trump has said some crazy stuff, including making comparisons.
I have a theory about
manhood, and I don't know whether that's going to hurt or help him in the elections. But
Sorry, I missed what you said there, Mark. You made a crazy comment about what?
Arnold Palmer's manhood.
Right, I have a theory that
he made a joke about the size of his, you know what, in the showers and everything.
In 2016, Trump famously said, I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any votes. I feel like this is in the same vein, that his people, his handlers, can't stop him from saying what he wants, and he's going to say what he wants, and his base, they love it, and he's going to keep doing it, maybe partly to demoralize the other side, because the other side realizes Trump can do whatever the F he wants and he won't lose any votes. But,
well, maybe some of the appeal is that he's standing up to the politicians and saying whatever the hell he wants instead of listening to their garbage. I want to come back to the polling stuff that you talked about. Look, I would argue that most of the polls are actually left-leaning, but I think that that's besides the point. If the average, if he wins, the average win that they're expecting is for it to be about 306. Now, people like myself that are much more bullish on him than that, I'm saying that I don't think Kamala Harris will hit 200, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 350 or more. We'll certainly find that out on election day, or a month after election day, depending on how they count the votes. But that's what I'm expecting now. To use the analogy that you've used about the midterm elections, yes, it was a red trickle, not a red wave, but they did still take back the House, not by the margins that they would have hoped for. So if that same thing were to occur now, if what you're doing is conceding that the polls are indicating that he's going to win, well, that would mean that maybe he wins by 280 instead of 306, right? So I don't think that the polling errors, or I don't think the polls are overestimating Trump. I think that they're more likely to be overestimating Kamala Harris. Now, there was a report that came out late last week or over the weekend where they looked at a Siena poll for New York. And what they did was they adjusted the poll to account for the actual demographics in New York, where they said that the Siena poll had actually over-sampled Democrats. When they adjusted it for what the actual demographics are, and without assuming that any Democrats are voting for Republicans or there's been any changes, the numbers actually narrowed to a Harris lead of 1.4. Now, I personally think the 1.4, that doesn't sound right to me. If it is 1.4, well, that puts her in a lot of trouble if she's only 1.4 in New York. But I'm just saying that you can slice and dice these numbers however you like and come up with a picture that supports whatever your preconceived ideas are. I think that the markets tend to be trending in his favour. Over the weekend, his price has dropped, which means his odds have gone up in the betting markets internationally with the bookmakers as well as the poly markets. And the polls are trending towards him, even in those places that he hasn't taken the lead in. So I think that looks pretty interesting.
Along those lines, I was going to stay in on politics for a minute, and then I'm going to ask a quick question, then we'll get to some international news before we close out the show and everything along those lines. But how successful do you think, because one of our panelists that actually appeared in recently here and everything, Jan Cromartie, is running for a local office, and he wants people to, as soul and water, wants people to do a write-in campaign for him. I think write-in campaigns are almost impossible to win and everything. So whether on the national level or on the local level, which is what he's trying to get, how successful do you think write-in campaigns can be? And if so, how can they be successful?
Look, unfortunately, I think Rick and possibly Sasha would be better at answering that than I. I actually have never heard of a write-in campaign except for in the United States. So it's just not something that...
except in exceptional situations. A write-in campaign can only work in a tiny election. For instance, LA has a system of neighborhood council government, which is just a treat they threw to various neighborhoods to stop them seceding from Los Angeles. Los Angeles wanted to split 20 years ago. So they created these little neighborhood offices. I ran for one and I was elected with 68 votes. That was enough to get me elected. Or if it's a high school student,
Didn't Joe Biden have a write-in for his primary in, well, was it Pennsylvania or Michigan or somewhere like that?
Where?
It was somewhere. Look, I can't remember what state it was, but didn't he have a write-in campaign for his primaries?
It might have been, and like I said, I don't think anybody was running against them, or it might have been a very easy to write in. But yeah, I think write-ins are hard and everything. This is where I'm going to go to Sasha on the international front, because apparently 7 Israelis have been arrested on suspicion of spying for Iran and gathering info on targeted IDF bases. So I know that war is still going on in the Middle East, and I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that, as well as thoughts about Moldova, which apparently narrowly voted for EU membership amid fraud claims. And I know that we're trying to figure out what they were going to do, and that's the small country of Moldova. So I know that you follow both of those stories. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts around both of those, Sasha.
I would prefer to. Can you take out this garbage from the screen, please?
Kim put that up, but I'll take it now.
Okay. Okay, I would prefer to look at the bigger picture. Okay, so we have a war started by Hamas in 2023, October 7th. Okay, so it's now more than a year since the beginning of that war. What's happened in this year? Israel is completely victorious on all fronts that they are there. Starting with Hamas, the leader of Hamas was just liquidated a few days ago. There is nothing much else left. If it wouldn't be for hostages, they would absolutely obliterate it, complete Hamas leadership, all of them, not 99%, but 100. And yet, it's still the goal. However, the freedom of hostages is a very important factor, and they have to play both of them. Now, on the other hand, in Hezbollah, they started the actions like sending the weapons of all kinds, the missiles, right on October 8th, next day after Hamas attack. Well, it was a very difficult time for Israel because it had to essentially start waging war on both fronts, both Hamas and Hezbollah. So they played it for a time that they prepared their response, and then they unleashed that response on Hamas first and on Hezbollah recently. And result on Hezbollah, all leadership has been decimated. Half of the army destroyed, half of the weapons were liquidated. So basically, they still have to liquidate whatever is still there left. Now, Iran without Hezbollah and without Hamas is nothing. It's a puppet republic that can be taken over by a few brigades of Israel easily in a matter of an hour and a half. So we'll see how that will be developed, what targets Israel will choose to destroy in Iran, and that will be the end of the day. That is a last war that Israel is to fight. There will be no more wars.
Sasha's referring to Israel still owes reprisal to Iran over their missile attack, and
That's
Israel says
anyway. It's not that for that.
But Israel says, yeah, we will respond in our own time. If you were going to be conspiracy minded and thinking, well, Netanyahu wants Trump to be president, then they would attack Iran, in a week or so, right before the election. Will they do that? I don't know. I don't know how much Netanyahu thinks about the U.S. on a moment-to-moment basis. But yeah, there still is at least one more play for Israel against Iran. But those guys are showing it hasn't been all-out war between Israel and Iran. I don't think either country wants all-out war.
But speaking of that play and everything, just really quickly, because there's another person involved, and apparently you kind of, either you or Sasha or Shaquille mentioned it earlier, but I guess Putin is still trying to say that he is a player in the game because he hosted a summit in a bid to show the West it can't keep Russia off the global stage, because they literally held a BRICS conference during the middle of his war.
Well, Sasha made comments about BRICS' sole purpose to be against America and Western values. Look, I'm not sure that I'd agree with that, Sasha. I think Putin certainly has taken that position, and Putin certainly wants there to be more of an anti-American slant to things. I don't think that was well received by the other founding members. I think that they've actually, sort of tried to constrain him a bit in relation to that. Look, I think really it is a trading bloc that has been underdeveloped by the West, hasn't had the sort of trade relationships that they wanted to have, and they're basically trying to build an alliance with each other and with other countries. And they talk about those countries representing 40% of the world's population, 25% of the world's economy. It's a powerful trading bloc, and why should they, from their perspective? You can go next, but let me just finish this. Why should they be reliant on the United States? The other thing that I'll say is in relation to Trump's policies about the America First stuff. Look, I think that if he is to America First at the cost of trade with international countries, that could not just weaken the US's position internationally, but it also potentially could lead to those countries permanently trading elsewhere and that being a permanent weakening. My fear would be that if he brings back manufacturing jobs to the United States, basically by brute force, what you'll see is an offshoring of more professional positions, consultants' positions, back office positions, etc., because those will end up going offshore to make up for the manufacturing that's come onshore, and that's much harder to tariff professional services. So I think he has to be careful, but he does have to. I think what he's trying to respond to is that globalization has led to the lack of manufacturing jobs in the United States, as it has done in Australia and many other countries, and that's left a big part of the United States with with less jobs and a smaller economy. So look, is his plans right or wrong? I think that his plans might work. Sasha's going next. I think his plans might work temporarily. It might be a good idea for 4 years. I don't think it's a good idea for 20 years.
Sasha?
The question is, does America want to be a backward country with its production of coal and other 200 years old industry with low wages and dangerous jobs? Does America really want it? Vote for Trump. Trump will provide plenty of it. Trump wants America be backward country with the very short-lived the audience that is easy to manipulate with and pull the strings and drill, baby, drill. And in the meantime, he cuts and makes millionaires, multimillionaires. If that's what you want, vote for Trump. You'll find.
Creating more millionaires, or turning millionaires into multimillionaires. I don't see a problem with that personally. I'm not sure anybody would be unhappy with having more millionaires in their country. But to come back to your core point, there's a big swathe of the people that have felt like they've been left behind, and there's a lot of manufacturing jobs that globalization has caused to be moved offshore to countries that aren't necessarily developing country where wages are cheaper. You're seeing a lot of stuff that's being engineered in Germany. Now, the wages aren't lower in Germany than what they are in the United States. So why aren't those things being engineered in the US? What you're seeing also is a lot of time international companies using tax treaties in order to be able to move the profits. They provide the good or service into the United States, but all the profits are generated by their offshore parent company. These sorts of things have distorted the market, not least of which is what private equity has done to distort the market. A lot of those profits also go offshore. So I don't think that it's unreasonable for him to come in. For the same reasons, I don't think it's actually unreasonable for Elizabeth Warren. You might find it surprising to hear me say this. I don't think it's unreasonable for Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders to talk about the corporations and private equity actually hurting the market and hurting jobs. So I think that he's responding to that in his own way. And I think personally, as you all know, I think that his plan is better than what Kamala Harris's plans are. Her plans are what? Increase tax and increase government spending. I don't get it. I don't understand why anybody who, unless they're just politically biased, would look at that sort of a plan and go, yeah, that sounds like a winner.
Shaquille, I hope you understand one thing, that US is imperialistic country that can survive only as being on top of the pyramid. Because intrinsically, if you were trying to compare the job, what Germans are doing in similar industries as United States, you can't compare how much Germans are much more competitive than US workers. Their job ethics is second to none. Only Japanese has something similar. They have pride in their jobs. They have a huge number of so-called...
You're picking on one example. I can name other countries.
Shaquille, why?
You're picking on one. I use Germany, so you try to pick on my example of Germany. Should we talk about France? Should we talk about a whole of other countries? Australia, who has manufacturing of some things that the United States should be able to manufacture. Pharmaceuticals, it's the same thing. Why did all these things need to be done offshore when it could be done for a similar cost, onshore in our own countries? And I think that's what Donald Trump's talking about.
Okay, you don't understand anything about world economies, okay?
Just really quickly, both of you.
Really, come on now. Disagree with you to the same as we don't understand the economy.
Really question both of you, and this is a question I've got to ask. I'm being somewhat serious, but somewhat maybe not as serious as I could be, because I can have my moment of comedy as well and everything. But there is a major issue that apparently neither communists or capitalists can get right, which is the whole notion of what to do when the weather impacts your economy and everything, or all along those lines. Because apparently, as we know, Texas, which is definitely a conservative town and everything, had problems with its power grid, and now Cuba, which is definitely a communist country, is having power with their power grid. So is there something that can be done about these power grid issues that are being caused by storms and climate in most of these environments? Because I know even you, Shaquille, have talked about this notion of left and right both can adjust and everything. So maybe this is an issue that we can adjust on and everything. Because when I see that Cuba's got its third day of blackouts, and I remember the blackouts in Texas, is there something that we can do about these blackouts?
Well, I mean, blackouts are inevitable anywhere, but I can't comment on Cuba. The US electricity grid is woeful, in my opinion, and it needs to have an investment. And not least of which is, why don't you sink the lines? I do want to just come back to Sasha's comments, though, about the world economy. I get it that certain countries are able to compete even if they're at the same price point. What I'm simply pointing out is that there have been a lot of jobs that have been moved offshore for the sake of globalization by international players who are actually extracting the profits out of the United States and putting them offshore. So not only does the US not get the jobs, they also don't get the tax revenue. And I think that that's being responded to. And what you're seeing is a shift around the world of people that are saying, hey, we need to start introducing these sorts of policies here. You talk to people who are sitting on the right in Australia, and they're saying, hey, how come we've lost all of our manufacturing jobs to other countries? How come we don't have a car industry here? How come we don't build ships here? That sort of thing. So those are the conversations that you're observing in other wealthy countries. Again, I don't think it's a healthy idea for the United States to become too isolationist, but as a temporary measure, as a way to correct some things, maybe it's not such a bad idea. And actually, that's not a conservative idea. That's a liberal idea, really.
What do you think of Elon? There's a notion, you mentioned Elon Musk earlier, but apparently his daily $1 million giveaway to registered voters, folks are saying that actually could be illegal and everything. I know the Pennsylvania governor has come up and wants to investigate this idea and everything. So I'm guessing he's going to do the lottery way of getting folks to vote and everything. So is this
first, hang on a second. Shapiro, when asked about it, he said he'd investigate. He was asked on MSNBC, I believe was the channel, whether it was illegal, and he didn't just come out and say it's illegal. So obviously he doesn't know. I assume that what he's doing is legal. Let's just be clear: it's not actually about him randomly giving $1 million to people for voting. It was about him, about people who signed the petition in support of the Constitution. That was what the $1 million giveaway is about every day between now and the election. It's
dancing on the edge of legality, because it's really, I mean, it's It's a lottery to excite Trump voters. Now, but it doesn't say that. So, I mean, they'll have to figure it out. Like you said, we don't know. They'd have to figure it out in court.
Well, what does dancing on the? Sorry, go on.
It's illegal to pay people to vote for a specific candidate.
It's illegal to pay people to vote for a specific candidate, but as I mentioned, Jan Camardi, I know that there are people that literally are paid to work the polls, and sometimes I wonder about that as well and everything, because there are literally people that are paid to go out there and campaign for various.
So what does dancing on the edge of legality mean? I mean, I'd hate to be driving and have a Democrat as a police officer behind me.
Well, because
they pull me over. They pull me over and they say, you know, do you know why I pulled you over? And I say, no. Like, why? And they said, well, you're doing 50. And I say, but it's a 50 zone. And they'd say, yes, but if you were going 51, then you'd be speeding. So you're dancing on the edge of legality. So what are we talking about here? It's either illegal or it's not.
Well, no, he must have gotten together with a couple of lawyers, and they said, you can't offer $1 million for people who promised to vote for Trump, but you can offer $1 million for people who promised to support the Constitution or the First and Second Amendments, I think is what, and you can talk about it at Trump rallies. So
yeah, you do that just really quickly.
Is that, that's something needs to be.
We're going to wind down because I got to play that commercial one more time and everything. But I do have a question for you, Shaquille, as we're getting out the door, and I know you've only got a minute to answer and everything. But yesterday was, and you've been saying that you don't think that she can win and everything, Kamala's birthday. So as a birthday gift to her, is there anything, kind of putting your question that you asked to Toby, that you can think of that you actually like about her policies or her as a person? Maybe that can be her birthday gift that you can come from Shaquille, because her birthday was literally yesterday. I think she turned 50 and everything. So what is something that you actually like about Kamala Harris? Can't come up with anything for her birthday?
Is good looking, I guess. I mean, credit where credit's due. I'll tell you what, credit where credit's due. She is exceptional at playing the political game. And anybody who is going to run for president managed to actually get on the ticket and run for president when Democrats themselves didn't even want to vote for her 4 years ago. I think that is exceptional. So she's good looking. She looks like somebody who would be a lot of fun to hang around with. I think she'd be fun to, have a drink with and have a chat to, and, that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, I'm struggling.
Fair enough. You got any birthday shout outs for her, Rick, and everything? And then we'll play this alternative debate thing, and we can really get out of here because we got to get to other shows as well. But any
happy 60th birthday. She looks great for 60. She's not perfect, but very few presidents in history have been perfect. And, the other guy is even more flawed than she is.
You don't think Ronald Reagan was perfect, or Eisenhower? Come on now, these great Republicans.
I like Eisenhower as president. I thought he was pretty great, though he was before my time. But what I know about him, I think he had proven leadership in war, and then he was good in peace, and he cautioned against letting the military-industrial complex take over America. And he was totally right in that. So I like him. And Reagan, he had perfect hair. So
he did have perfect hair.
As I said, I'm teaching. I think that most presidents have been, in recent history, most presidents have been reasonable presidents for the time that they were in.
Right. So. Well, like I said, on that, we're going to
luck is a huge thing.
I did kind of like the whole notion of,
quick thing, like Bill Clinton was totally lucky that nothing very horrible happened in his time as president. Then the next president, he got hit with all the bad luck. So anyway.
It's all about luck sometimes in the presidency. And Bill Clinton, as I mentioned earlier, because the maestro mentioned it yesterday, apparently was a masterful saxophone player. So I have to see if he still can pick up that sax or not. Maybe he's still good at it. But on that note, we're going to get on out of here with this particular commercial.